Hello, and welcome back to the Poetry Podcast with me, Lance Pearson. I said we would devote this Programme 10 to Rudyard Kipling, as we've had a listener request for one of his poems, which I am delighted to read. But before we come to that, we shall start where we left off last time, with a poem I remember from childhood. A favourite book of mine was Kipling's Just So stories, with its intriguing, if improbable, tales of how the world came to be as it is. The stories are in prose, of course, but after each one there is a short poem taking a sideways look at the theme in a new light. And of course they contain an improving moral message for the young reader, full of Victorian values. After How the Camel Got His Hump, for instance, there is this memorable instruction about taking the hump in its metaphorical, emotional sense. When I first recorded it, we wanted some music to accompany its strong rhythm. My wonderful producer, Alison Burnett, said, "Give me a little while to see what I can find in this pile of copyright-free CDs." She returned an hour later with a short track that had no intended connection with the poem, but fitted it perfectly. We didn't have to edit the music at all.
The camel's hump is an ugly lump, which well you may see at the zoo. But uglier yet is the hump we get from having too little to do. Kiddies and grown-ups too, if we haven't enough to do, we get the hump, Camellia's hump, the hump that is black and blue. We climb out of bed with a frowsily head and a snarly, yarly voice. We shiver and scowl and we grunt and we growl at our bath and our boots and our toys. And there ought to be a corner for me, and I know there is one for you, when we get the hump, Camellia's hump, the hump that is black and blue. The cure for this ill is not to sit still, or frowst with a book by the fire, but to take a large hoe and a shovel also, and dig till you gently perspire. And then you will find that the sun and the wind and the gin of the garden too have lifted the hump, the horrible hump, the hump that is black and blue. I get it as well as you. If I haven't enough to do, we all get hump, Camellia's hump. Kiddies and grown-ups too.
Kipling lived from 1865 to 1936, and was very much a child of his times, as we shall see. Much of his writing feels very dated now, and perhaps what he wrote for children has survived best. He published the Just So stories in 1902. In 1910 came another children's book, Rewards and Fairies, and in it is the poem that has been requested, The Way Through the Woods. It is wonderfully atmospheric. The air of mystery reminds me of Kipling's younger contemporary, Walter de la Mare. They shut the road through the woods 70 years ago. Weather and rain have undone it again, and now you would never know there was once a road through the woods before they planted the trees. It is underneath the coppice and heath and the thin anemones. Only the keeper sees that where the ringdove broods and the badgers roll at ease, there was once a road through the woods. Yet if you enter the woods of a summer evening late, when the night air cools on the trout-ringed pools, where the otter whistles his mate, they fear not men in the woods, because they see so few. you will hear the beat of a horse's feet and the swish of a skirt in the dew, steadily cantering through the misty solitudes, as though they perfectly knew the old lost road through the woods. But there is no road through the woods. Kipling was born in India and worked there as a young adult. In 1889, aged 24, he came to London seeking fame and fortune as a writer. Among his first publications was his Barrack Room Ballads, based on the red-coated British colonial soldiers he had seen all his life. Among the famous poems are Gunga Din and The Road to Mandalay. The one I've chosen is Tommy, the slang name for the British private. It comes from Thomas Atkins being used as the sample name on specimen military official forms. But as in army experience since then, the private soldier had reason to feel he got a raw deal. I went into a public house to get a pint of beer. The publican he up and says, "We serve no redcoats here." The girls behind the bar, they laughed and giggled fit to die. I arcs into the street again, and to myself says I, "Oh, it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy go away." But it's "Thank you, Mr. Atkins," when the band begins to play. The band begins to play, my boys, the band begins to play. Oh, it's "Thank you, Mr. Atkins," when the band begins to play. I went into a theatre, as sober as could be. They gave a drunk civilian room, but hadn't none for me. They sent me to the gallery, or round the music halls. But when it comes to fighting, Lord, they'll shove me in the stalls, for it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy wait outside. But it's "Special train for Atkins," when the trooper's on the tide. The troop ship's on the tide, my boys, the troop ship's on the tide. Oh, it's "Special train for Atkins," when the trooper's on the tide. Yes, making mocker uniforms that guard you while you sleep is cheaper than them uniforms, and they're starvation cheap. And hustling drunken soldiers when they're going large a bit is 5 times better business than parading in full kit. Then it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy how's your soul? But it's "Thin red line of heroes" when the drums begin to roll. The drums begin to roll, my boys, the drums begin to roll. Oh, it's "Thin red line of heroes" when the drums begin to roll. We aren't no thin red heroes, nor we aren't no blackguards too, but single men in barracks, most remarkable, like you. And if sometimes our conduct isn't all your fancy paints, why, single men in barracks don't grow into plaster saints. While it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy fall behind. But it's "Please to walk in front, sir," when there's trouble in the wind. There's trouble in the wind, my boys, there's trouble in the wind. Oh, it's "Please to walk in front, sir," when there's trouble in the wind. You talk of better food for us, and schools, and fires and all. We'll wait for extra rations, if you treat us rational. Don't mess about the cookroom slops, but prove it to our face. The widow's uniform is not the soldier man's disgrace. For it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and chuck him out, the brute. But it's saviour of his country when the guns begin to shoot, and it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and anything you please. And Tommy, ain't a blooming fool. You bet that Tommy sees. These poems were a huge and instant success, establishing Kipling's reputation. At the time, he was living in lodgings in Villas Street, just across the road from Charing Cross Station. The ground floor of the house, which in normal times is still a fast food outlet, though sadly at the time of recording it's temporarily closed because of coronavirus, it was then the domain of Harris, the Sausage King. For 2 old pence, Kipling could buy all the sausage and mash he could eat. Another 2 bought him half an ounce of tobacco, and 4 got him a pewter of beer and a seat at Gatti's Music Hall underneath the railway arches. Kipling acknowledged that the smoke, the roar, and the good-natured fellowship of relaxed humanity at Gatti's set the scene for the Barrack Room Ballads. They took off so well that today the building where he lived is named Kipling House. He was launched on his writing career, which was phenomenally prolific. He wrote lots of prose, of course. There were the Jungle Books, the schoolboy stories in Storky & Co., the novel Kim, set in India. But in the recently published edition of his collected poems, there are over 1,300 of them. He lived through the official reigns of Tennyson, Austen, Bridges, and Masefield, but many regarded him as an unofficial poet laureate. His most famous poem today is If. It has more than once come top in a poll of the nation's favourite poems. I suppose I might be persuaded to read it if someone requested it, but I confess I don't like the restraint of some of its stiff upper-lip virtues. He was the poet of an empire that has now passed into history. The next poem I would like to read is equally of its time, but seems to me, like so many of Kipling's best poems, to have an abiding message for today. And I love its rhythm, so perfectly matching the mechanized optimism of the early 20th century. It is called The Secret of the Machines. We were taken from the ore bed and the mine. We were melted in the furnace and the pit. We were cast and wrought and hammered to design. We were cut and filed and tooled and gauged to fit. Some water, coal, and oil is all we ask, and 1,000th of an inch to give us play. And now, if you will set us to our task, we will serve you 24 hours a day. We can pull and haul and push and lift and drive. We can print and plough and weave and heat and light. We can run and race and swim and fly and dive. We can see and hear and count and read and write. Would you call a friend from half across the world? If you'll let us have his name and town and state, you shall see and hear your crackling question hurled across the arch of heaven while you wait. Has he answered? Does he need you at his side? You can start this very evening if you choose, and take the Western Ocean in the stride of 70,000 horses and some screws. The boat express is waiting your command. You will find the Mauretania at the quay, till her captain turns the lever 'neath his hand, and the monstrous 9-decked city goes to sea. Do you wish to make the mountains bare their head and lay their new-cut forests at your feet? Do you want to turn a river in its bed, or plant a barren wilderness with wheat? Shall we pipe aloft and bring you water down from the never-failing cisterns of the snows, to work the mills and tramways in your town and irrigate your orchards as it flows? It is easy. Give us dynamite and drills. Watch the iron-shouldered rocks lie down and quake, as the thirsty desert level floods and fills, and the valley we have dammed becomes a lake. But remember, please, the law by which we live. We are not built to comprehend a lie. We can neither love, nor pity, nor forgive. If you make a slip in handling us, you die. We are greater than the people or the kings. Be humble as you crawl beneath our rods. Our touch can alter all created things. We are everything on earth, except the gods. Though our smoke may hide the heavens from your eyes, it will vanish, and the stars will shine again. Because for all our power and weight and size, we are nothing more than children of your brain. And isn't that true of today's computers and robots and artificial intelligence? I am finishing with my favourite Kipling poem. He wrote it in 1892 in America. He went there that year on his honeymoon, and it turned into a 4-year stay. And you might pick up from the poem the vibe that he was stung by bad reviews from critics. He put it as the end piece in his book of poems, The 7 Seas, 4 years later. This was another great success, selling more than any of his poetry books except Barrack Room Ballads. He was still a young man, but I relish his vision of the next life as I grow older. And though neither he nor I is a painter, I revel in his view of the arts in general. When Earth's last picture is painted, and the tubes are twisted and dried, when the oldest colours have faded, and the youngest critic has died, we shall rest, and faith we shall need it, lie down for an aeon or two, till the master of all good workmen shall put us to work anew. And those that were good shall be happy. They shall sit in a golden chair. They shall splash at a 10-league canvas with brushes of comet's hair. They shall find real saints to draw from, Magdalene, Peter, and Paul. They shall work for an age at a sitting, and never be tired at all. And only the Master shall praise us, and only the Master shall blame, and no one shall work for money, and no one shall work for fame, but each for the joy of the working, and each in his separate star shall draw the thing as he sees it, for the God of things as they are. That's all for now, folks. If you've a request for a poem you'd like me to read, please leave a comment at the website, thepoetrypodcastwithlancepearson.com, or on our YouTube page. Next month will be December, in the year when we're recording, and we shall have a selection of Christmas poems which you might like to use in your own celebrations, especially if in 2020 Christmas has to be a bit more virtual than usual. And it will include one more poem by Kipling.